IT managers are frequently faced with sometimes hundreds of decisions about their applications. Now, how best to manage those strategically? Professor Chris Edwards has got an approach that he calls the applications portfolio. Now, Chris, tell me some more about this.
The applications portfolio has been around really for quite a long time. It's a way of organisations being able to manage a multitude of different types of application. Let me explain. If you have just one way of managing applications, then that works fine for that sort of application. But when you do something different, then you have a problem that the approach you're using doesn't quite suit. Let me give you an example. It'll be clearer. If you were trying to install a large ERP system, then you'd need something that had prints all over it, that had lots of governance involved, really something that was very robust. Contrast that with how you would manage a small, innovative application where you were just trying to find out whether something was worth doing. You'd manage that much more loosely, much more informally. The governance meetings wouldn't be rigid, wouldn't be quite so frequent. And what the applications portfolio is trying to do is to provide a collection of different sorts of applications so that you can start managing each type of application according to its value to the business.
So that seems to suggest that you classify these into some sort of types.
Yes, absolutely. Usually it's 4. Some organisations make it 3, some make it 5, but the normal one is 4 different classifications. The words that are normally used are high potential, strategic, key operational and support. And these 4 groups represent the different values that each of those sorts of applications represent to the business.
And presumably then the treatment that's given to these.
Absolutely. The treatment that's given to each of those 4 are different. And you'd expect an organisation somewhere to have a list of those 4 and ways that they suggest each type should be managed. Then when an application comes along, the first question you ask is, which sort of application is this? If it's high potential, then the way of managing high potential is applied to that application.
So let's go into some nitty-gritty details. You've got a lot of experience of using this in practice. So can you illustrate that with some examples?
We've just been working with a very large bank. They wanted to put in a new project management system because the one that they had, people were avoiding using it. People would say, well, it doesn't really apply to this project, it doesn't apply to that project. And eventually no one was using it for anything. And they realised that any one method that they had of managing projects wouldn't work. So they defined 4 separate project management systems that were appropriate for those different sorts of applications that I mentioned earlier. And they put in place a whole governance regime which began with saying, well, what sort of application is this? Then when they decided which sort of application it was, they then applied that project management method to that application. So effectively, people couldn't avoid using it because they'd have to say which sort it was, and then they'd apply an appropriate sort of governance methodology to that application.
Now, do these classifications stay true for all time, or do they tend to move between categories sometimes?
Well, the application may move between categories, absolutely, but the definition of the categories remain robust in an organisation for a long period of time and often don't change at all. But for any one application, it may begin its life as a high potential application. You try it on a small scale. It may succeed, it may turn out to be hugely beneficial to the business on a small scale, and then you redevelop that application as a strategic application, and this time you're doing it for the whole organisation rather than just one small part, and you use a different methodology for doing that.
So if you were to sum up then the value of using this applications portfolio, what would it be?
I think it brings variety to managing projects. It allows people to use an appropriate methodology rather than having to use one single methodology, which is sometimes not appropriate for very many of the things they're doing.
Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.